This is an extract from the Leader podcast by the Evening Standard, hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for us on your podcast provider.
It was the most vivid, most awful flash, a terrible booming noise, and a feeling of hot wind and air.
These are the first-hand accounts of survivors of 2 nuclear bombs detonated by the US over Hiroshima and Nagasaki 75 years ago this week.
I went up to the hillside and took a panorama view of the city and found whole city on the fire.
The End of the World exhibition by the Imperial War Museum reflects on the impacts of the attacks that killed 140,000 people instantly and flattened 2 cities. The survivors now have an urgent message for their government: do more to ban nuclear weapons. Those that exist today are much more powerful than those used in Japan. So what would happen if a nuclear attack happened in 2020 in a city like London? The Evening Standard's Bonnie Christian asked nuclear policy analyst Sophie McCormack from the Institute for Security and Technology, who also works with BASIC, the British-American Security and Information Council.
If London was under attack, how much warning would someone like the Prime Minister get?
It depends on where that nuclear weapon is coming from. So from which country that's being launched, which type of nuclear weapon. We're normally talking minutes rather than hours. So you can have early warning systems, but if you think about the trajectory of these weapons, how far they can travel, how fast they travel, and the damage that they cause when they hit, if you're warned about a nuclear weapon, it's going to hit you within a couple of minutes. There is literally nothing you can do about it. You need to decide, what are you going to do? Are you going to launch a nuclear weapon back?
Would the weapons we have today be enough to wipe out the entire city of London? How do they compare to 75 years ago?
We're talking thousands of times more destruction, more potency. So not only are there more nuclear weapons in the world, the destruction and actually the precision of the ones that we have now are thousands of times greater than the ones dropped in 1945.
How far away would those impacts be felt?
The first stage is you get a fireball. So this is within a second. So in a millisecond, a fireball that's hotter than the sun, so something that we can't really appreciate, appears. This will grow to approximately 2 kilometres. So to put it in context, if a nuclear bomb was dropped at the top end of Oxford Street, that 2-kilometre fireball would reach the other end of Oxford Street. So everything within this 2-kilometre radius disappears instantly. Roads, shops, trees, people, gone. The light that this explosion creates is what we call a flash. This light reaches all over London. If you happen to be within this millisecond looking in the direction of the explosion, then you would be blinded probably for the rest of the day because the light is so strong. This light is also so hot that it creates a thermal pulse, and then everything within a 13-kilometre radius is wiped out. So again, taking Oxford Street as an example, the radius northwest would reach Wembley Stadium. So this sounds bad enough, but the heat and pressure created by that explosion is so strong that everything within a 500 square kilometre radius of that top end of Oxford Street would catch fire. So anything that can burn would burn. So that also would include people. Then you get a shockwave. So the shockwave, this again happens within seconds. So the first bit's milliseconds, second bit seconds. This shockwave expands it faster than the speed of sound. It's caused by the heat and the compressed air at the centre of the explosion. The impact of the shockwave is so immense that if you think of Hurricane Katrina and then add some, and then everything within a 175 square kilometre radius of Oxford Street would collapse from that shockwave. And then the third stage would be within a couple of minutes. You get a fireball. So that classic image that we all associate with a nuclear explosion is that mushroom cloud. It reaches a couple of kilometres up into the sky. And that's so strong that it sucks everything, all of the air from across London. It sucks it in so fast that as it's pulling it in, it pulls down any buildings that happen to be left standing within that radius.
As you said, we've all seen that classic picture of the mushroom cloud towering over the city, but if you're standing underneath it, what does that look like?
The pressure causes mass firestorms within a 21 kilometre radius. Again, 21 kilometres of Oxford Street, huge firestorms. And if you think, obviously it all depends on cities, but like London's a very developed city, so we've got loads of fuel, there's loads of points that are very flammable. So the strength of a firestorm in London would be especially acute. But then obviously there's also the aftermath. One of the quotes that I find most useful with this is that a nuclear explosion is like every natural disaster happening at once.
For the people that do manage to survive, what would the aftermath be like for them?
So for the next few hours and even days, the people who have managed to survive this will, of course, be temporarily blinded and deafened by the explosion, but then they could have injuries from glass shattering, from buildings collapsing. And because you can't get, there's no infrastructure anymore. All of the hospitals have gone, and all of the transport in and out of London, all of those routes have also gone. So people who are suffering with minor to major, well, probably more major injuries are likely to then die over the next hours and days from their injuries, because you can't get in any help and you can't get around because there are no clear roads anymore. Everything is flattened on there. And then, of course, the one that everyone always thinks about is all of the radiation. So the radiation is so strong that it basically then kind of like isolates the city, because even if there is help around that could get in, the radiation is so strong that it's not safe for them to do so.
The survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are calling for more to be done to ban nuclear weapons. Is this something that we could see happen?
In the short term, absolutely not. The 5 nuclear states that signed up to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, so Russia, France, UK, US and China, one of the pillars of that treaty is to work towards disarmament. However, when you think of how many nuclear weapons there are in the world, you've got those 5 nuclear states, but then you've got 4 nuclear armed states, so states that got nuclear weapons outside of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And the states that have them see those nuclear weapons as pretty intrinsic to their security. The amount that needs to change in terms of how we achieve our security, or how we perceive that we secure our security, as well as the logistics of there are so many nuclear weapons in the world, how would you go about getting rid of them? It's not suddenly saying, okay, cool, let's all get rid of them. They're all there. What do you do with them? States with nuclear weapons say they are committed to working towards disarmament, but the logistics behind achieving that are very complex.